Welcome everyone. Good evening. We're so excited that you have joined us today. Welcome to today, the only one, a good one. Let's make it a great one. My name is Cassius Stallings. I'm so excited and honored that you are here, hear this conversation, flipping the script, changing the mental health narrative. Before we get into our time, I want us to take a moment to respect the pause. Respect the pause is a phrase that I often say, and what it is, acknowledging time. It's acknowledging moments, it's acknowledging, the pause. And it happens, when before we leave the house, we're putting on our shoes, whether it's lacing them up or sliding on our Crocs or our flops, and just taking that brief moment to acknowledge that. Because right after that, we're getting ready to hit the world. And once we hit the world, we're either hit with a stoplight or maybe a train, and then we get another moment to pause. And once we're past that, there's another moment where we're pausing again. Maybe we enter into a line somewhere and we have to pause and reflect even more. And so today I want us to take this moment right now as we get settled in, lace your feet down, place your hands somewhere. We're going to do two things. We're going to take 2 breaths and then we're going to pause. And so as we, again, get settled, I'll lead us in those breaths and then I'll come back after the pause. So we can go. I thank you all. I thank you guys for respecting the pause and taking that moment. And a lot of you are probably like, well, that was 2. There's normally sequence of 1, 2, 3. That third one is for you. In your everyday life, maybe when you're leaving here, maybe tomorrow, maybe this weekend, or maybe even further down the line, there's going to be a moment where you're going to need that third breath. And I encourage you to take it. And so again, my name is Cassius Stallings. I serve as a community outreach coordinator with Health Visions Midwest of Fort Wayne. Health Visions is a local ministry here in Fort Wayne, and I love that because that's a backing of, I know who has my back when I step into places. I understand who is with me, and we're so honored that you guys are a part of this conversation with us. I'm so honored to serve with Health Visions, and they allow me to enter into these spaces. Right now, I want to take a moment to acknowledge this room and where we're at. I want to bring up Cass Winters, who works at the Allen County Public Library, and just going to give us a brief little welcome.
So welcome to Allen County Public Library and specifically to this worthwhile panel discussion and networking event. So it's great that you're all here today. So as Cassius mentioned, my name is Cass Winters. I am the Social Services Coordinator for Allen County Public Library. Last year, the library decided to get into the social work game and they created my role. We provide referrals to different community agencies. And some of those agencies are mental health referrals. The library also provides educational opportunities. You can find these on the events website. That includes community partnerships, including like this one today. We are hoping that you come away today from today's conversation with new knowledge and a desire to continue the important dialogue around breaking stigma around mental health. We at ACPL want to give a warm welcome to Cassius Stallings from Health Visions Midwest and the rest of the panelists that are here today. I'm going to return now the mic to Cassius, and I hope you enjoy today's panel discussion.
Thank you so much, Cass, and Allen County Public Library. I don't know about you all, but I grew up coming to the library and I've always found it to be an intriguing place. You're always coming here, sometimes with a hunger to learn. You're gonna come away with some new knowledge, some new information, and that's what we hope to offer today. We hope that you're walking away with some new knowledge, some new tools, and a new way to just kind of think around health and mental health. And so tonight's event will include a keynote speaker, phenomenal person, along with a panel discussion. And so I'll help facilitate that panel discussion. And then we're going to want to hear from you. We're going to want to hear what questions you have for the panelists. So as both the keynote and the panelists are speaking, I want you to think about some questions that you may want to ask them both in person and we are online. So you online as well be thinking. And so with that, I want to take this moment to introduce our keynote for the evening. So this gentleman is a behavior consultant with the organization he founded, Impact Behavior. He is also the co-owner of the Rage Room located on Spy Run in Clinton, with over 10 years of experience in the field, helping individuals go from where they are to where they want to be. Our keynote for the evening, Mr. Jeff Guy. Jeff Guy.
Hello, hello. Thank you. Thank you to Cassius. Thank you to Midwest Health Visions and to the Allen County Public Library. I will say I'm not the owner or organizer of Impact Behavior. That person is back here in the back, but I am an employee of Impact Behavior. And I am a behavioral consultant and also the co-owner of the Rage Room here in Fort Wayne. So today we're here to talk about kind of breaking the stigma, flipping the script. So when I thought of flipping the script, I just kind of thought of, what does that mean? And I thought about writing the stories that we come up with in our head and how we tell ourselves a story, but we can turn that around and then that can help us in our mental health and our just kind of overall well-being. So that's kind of the direction I'm going to go with it. So rewriting the story, small shifts for better mental health. How the stories we tell ourselves shape our well-being. So I'll just jump into it, and to kind of get us, there we go. To get us thinking about what we're going to talk about today, I have a couple quotes to start with. The first one is from Anais Nin, who was a French-American author. She said that we don't see things as they are, but we see them as we are. And then the second quote comes from Marcus Aurelius, who is a Roman Empire thousands of years ago, but he has spoken a lot and written a lot in terms of stoicism, and that still stays with us today. So he said, if you are pained by any external thing, it is not this thing that disturbs you, but it's your own judgment about it. And it is in your power to wipe out this judgment now. So that's Marcus Aurelius. So that's just kind of where I want to place us in the headspace of where we're at today, that, we tell ourselves one thing, but we have the power to kind of change it.
Thank you so much, Kat.
So what is the story that we tell ourselves? Well, it's that internal narrative running through our minds daily. It's that voice that we all have in our heads when we're just kind of going through our day and we're just kind of having a conversation with ourselves. So we're talking about that internal narrative that runs through our minds every day. It influences our mood, our self-worth, our resilience, but it's often subconscious, and it's often very critical of ourselves. Our brains are story-making machines, but they often create narratives that are based on fear, comparison, or past experiences. But not all the stories that we tell ourselves are accurate. Our brains are always constantly filling in gaps, interpreting the world around us, and making meaning of the world around us. So our brains are just kind of always doing this. We're just talking to ourselves, telling ourselves what we're seeing, what we're getting, what the information is, and then we're creating our own story that whatever that situation is. That's not positive or negative, it's just a situation, and then we put the positive, the negative, all that kind of stuff on it. So why does this matter? Well, our thoughts shape our brain. And it's kind of the thought of the neuroplasticity, and that is the brain's remarkable ability to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections throughout life. And this adaptability allows the brain to adapt to new experiences, learn new skills, and even recover from injuries or trauma. It's a fundamental aspect of learning, memory, and brain function. So in that vein, if we're having repeated negative self-talk to ourselves, well, that's going to equal chronic stress, depression, self-doubt, anxiety, all of those things. And then what happens is we're telling ourselves that, and then we start to believe that story. We start leaning into that story, and then that affects a little bit of our behavior and our attitude and things like that. So it's kind of like the neurons that fire together are wired together. And it kind of reminds me of a few years ago, I worked in a foster care system. And I would train the foster parents on just how to be when they're going to receive this new child into their home. And if you know anything about that, you have a child coming in who's coming into a home that's a whole new environment for them. They're a stranger to that. The child is a stranger to the family. So like, where do we go from here? And if you know anything about kids in foster care, they're coming from environments that are a little bit more chaotic than what you would think of as a normal home. So they're coming in and their brain has been wired through that, through trauma and through their experiences. So they're always in a heightened state when they are coming into a new foster home. And the foster home is setting the tone for their home and their environment. And if it's the type of foster family that we want, that home is going to be in a better situation than the other environment that they're coming from. So what we had to teach the foster parents is that they're coming in with their brains and everything already set in one direction. But we know now that with neuroplasticity that like our brains can be rewired. They don't have to be fixed in that way. We can change that. So in the foster care system, it's through encouragement and repetition that, so like the example is a foster kid comes home, he just wants to flip his shoes off all over the place. But the parents want them to set the shoes down at the door when they come into the house. So they have to work with that child every day with repetition of getting them to put the shoes right there, giving them positive praise, encouragement, and having empathy when they flip their lid and they don't want to do it. But if you do that over time, the neurons can kind of come together and form, and then next thing you know, they're able to do that thing. So it's a beautiful thing when you can see it in person. I got to see it in person in the foster care system a little bit. And that's kind of what we're talking about here today. Again, through repetition, through being aware of this, we have the ability to change it. And then we form those new neurons, and next thing you know, we can have different type of behavior, different type of attitude about life. All right, so some common harmful stories that we tell ourselves, it may be familiar to some of you. You could be telling yourself, I'm not good enough. Everyone else has it figured out. If I fail, I'm a failure. They didn't reply, so they must be mad at me. They don't like me. I'll never be happy. Nobody likes me. All these type of things are kind of just examples of stuff that we may have told ourselves when we're kind of down on ourselves. And these thoughts to us feel like facts, but really they're just stories, and they're often unexamined and untrue because we haven't put them to the test of anything. We're just going along with it. So what I want you to realize and think about is that you are not your thoughts. You are the observer of your thoughts, which means that you can become the author and the editor of your thoughts. It doesn't have to be just what you see there. You have the power to change it. So that idea is kind of in the concept of cognitive reframing, where we choose to edit our internal stories. And this could also be like cognitive behavioral therapy. So this is basically just like CBT therapy, which is a type of talk therapy that helps people manage their mental health problems by changing their thoughts and behaviors. And it focuses on the relationship between our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. So that's kind of what we're doing I'm trying to get us to where we can do it on ourselves little by little every day to kind of help our own mental health. But if you are somebody that's going through something maybe a little stronger, I would encourage maybe some kind of therapy if you want to. CBT therapy would be a good way to kind of have somebody help facilitate this if you realize, maybe you need a little bit more extra help than what you can do for yourself. But that's what we're talking about here. You are the observer of your thoughts, which means you can become the author or the editor. So how can we change the story? Well, it's kind of three ways to do it. It starts with awareness. You want to notice the story and the internal narrative. Second thing you want to do is get curious and not judgmental. And the third thing is rewrite with compassion. So kind of the way it will go is, let's use an example of you keep telling yourself I'm behind in life. You're kind of looking around and I'm just not where I want to be at. I'm behind in life. So the first thing you want to do is come to an awareness that you're even telling yourself this and ask yourself, what's the evidence of this? Why am I even telling myself this? Where did it come from? Then get curious, not judgmental. Again, you're kind of asking like, who taught me this? Where did I get this from? Why am I being so hard on myself? Is this the case? And then kind of you went through those kind of steps, then you want to rewrite that with compassion. And so that can turn I'm behind in life into, everyone has their own pace and I'm learning and evolving. So now you've kind of changed your mindset and how you're thinking about it. And it's not as much of a negative connotation. It's kind of the same life, but you're looking at it as, you've just opened a life of opportunity if you kind of look at it that way. So we're gonna have a couple more examples of how we can reframe this, or some examples of some reframing in action. So again, just some kind of common phrases that you may have told yourself before. I always mess things up. Well, again, you go back to the awareness. You have to get aware that you're even telling yourself this in the first place. Then get curious. Why am I telling myself this? Where did I learn this from? Why am I feeling this way? And then come up with a way to then flip it a little bit. So before I always mess things up. After I made a mistake, I'm learning. Same thing. I'm behind in life. I'm on a different path. Growth isn't linear. As we can see, it's the same life, new meaning. Nothing in the life of this person has changed. The only thing that's changed is what they're telling themselves, which then frees them to be able to make different actions and different things to happen for themselves. Same life, new meaning. So it kind of it gives me a kind of a personal example. So in 2008, 2009, I was working at a factory. just a regular auto factory, and a position came available of a supervisor role that I was like, you know what, I'll try to go for that role. I didn't have any education at that time. At that time, I had tried college twice and had dropped out. But I knew the job well enough that I could probably do it. And so I put in for it and I made it to the final round of interviews. It was between me and one other person. And ultimately they went with the other individual. So when we had the meeting and we sat down to kind of go over it, and they're like, you know, you're right there. And kind of the reason why we picked him is because he had a little bit more experience in PowerPoint and Excel. Because at that time, I just didn't have any really experience in that. So I left that meeting down on myself, right? Like, I'm never gonna get a supervisor position. I'm not gonna be able to do this. I'm stuck in this factory and making this amount of money. I've already dropped out of school twice. I'm not gonna be educated. So this is all I'm gonna be able to do. And I sat in that for a little bit. I became aware that I was telling myself this and decided that that's not what I wanted to do. And I started telling myself, you know what? I know I could do that position. How can I get myself in a better position to be able to do that? And I knew that that position was gonna come available again, possibly on another shift or something like that. So what I did is I just took it upon myself. I told myself some positive stuff, and then I looked into it, and lo and behold, the Allen County Public Library was having 2 free classes for PowerPoint and Excel. So I decided to go and I took it upon myself and I did those classes. I got certified in PowerPoint and Excel through the library. And then a couple months later, that position came available again. I interviewed for it again, and while sitting in the interview, I was able to tell them, since the last time I was here, I took it upon myself to get certified in these 2 things, and they loved that. And that's, got the position, got that supervisor role, and I had that position for the next 2 or so years while I was there until that factory closed down. Which then turned into another one of those situations, because then the factory closed down, and it's like, okay, well, now what am I going to do? And I was looking at my coworkers, and a lot of them were just really down. Life is over. Older people, life is over with. What am I going to do now? Other people, I didn't know what I'm supposed to do. And instead of going that route, I was like, you know what, this might be the best thing that's happened to me. You know what, I'm about to use this. I'm going to try to I'm going to go to school again. I'm going to get serious about it. And that put me on the path to where I'm at now in terms of what I do for work, working with people, psychology, and all that kind of good stuff. So those are just kind of 2 instances that I thought about myself that it's kind of what we're talking about today. Just taking something negative or just the world that it is. You tell yourself this story. But it doesn't have to be that. I could have just stayed in that, and that's what could have happened to my life. But I decided to tell myself different and then act on that and change it. So again, what we want to talk about is, like, when you're doing this, to have some self-compassion over self-criticism. A lot of times we're really critical on ourselves, but we give a lot of other people grace. But I want to say, give yourself some grace and be compassionate for yourself. So talk to yourself like you would a friend. If you're that person that friends reach out to you and you're able to talk to them, talk to yourself like that. Give yourself some grace. Self-compassion reduces anxiety, depression, and shame, but it also increases happiness, optimism, and resilience. So again, just be compassionate for yourself. Understand that we're all going through this. We're all trying to figure it out. Give yourself some grace. Sit in it a little bit. Have some quiet time. Get aware of what's going on, and then do what you got to do to change it. So with that thought, that's kind of the concept that I'm thinking about, and which will lead us to kind of some everyday small things that you can do to be able to kind of lead yourself towards this. I think I have about 6 things here. It's something that you can pick all 6. You can pick one, doesn't matter. These are just things that I came up with. But these are definitely just like small things that you can do every day on a daily basis to kind of help you start reframing and retelling the story. So the first thing would be journaling. Journaling is just start. Just pick a day, morning, night, and just start and be consistent with it. Journaling doesn't have to be this real big thing that we think about where you gotta have this, pick which book you're going to use and write a long page soliloquy or anything like that. You can really just start with 1 sentence a day. And some example prompts could be just something like, what did I do today? Who did I run into today? What did I think about today? And just answer that question. Easy peasy, couple minutes, go on about your business, but just be consistent with it and start. And then you can maybe work yourself up to a few minutes, and eventually maybe even write out the story that you've been telling yourself, and then create the new story and write this, change it. So rewrite the story. What story am I telling myself about today, and what's a more helpful version? And maybe that's something that you can do with journaling. journaling is a really good way to just kind of get your thoughts out in a real safe way, a non-judgmental way, and have a conversation with yourself. And again, when you're writing it down on paper, you're seeing it, you're saying it, it's going to start sticking it, and then you'll start being able to change that. Second thing, mindfulness and mindful self-talk. So again, just kind of giving yourself time to sit with yourself and then start being kind to yourself and talking yourself up. So everybody's probably heard of affirmations. So just kind of do some self-affirmation techniques, looking in the mirror, just sitting with yourself, telling yourself positive things in the present tense, not in the past tense or future tense, but present tense. I am capable, I am loved, I am courageous. Again, if you're somebody that's stuck and you're like, I don't even know what affirmations I would use. Google it. There's all kind of affirmations. They'll give you all kind of affirmations. There's affirmation cards that you can use. So again, don't just think that you have to do this all yourself. If you start feeling the need and the want to do it, look around and there's things that you can do to find out how you can use these kind of techniques. Second one is name plus kind words technique. So again, you just put your name in there. Jeff, you're doing your best. It's okay to rest. Jeff, you're allowed to be a work in progress. So you're just telling yourself these things. And then you're eventually giving yourself grace, you're giving yourself compassion, and that just frees you up a little bit to then kind of start trying some other things out. A gratitude scan before bed, that can also work with the journaling a little bit. And the point of this is to kind of having some quiet time before bed and sit with yourself and just be thankful and have gratitude. And maybe you can write down 3 wins or some positive moments that happened to you that day. I got to work without hitting the train today. I got it in there and I answered all my emails in the first hour and then I was done with it. 3 things that were really easy that went right that day. And what that does, it kind of rewires the brain for positivity at night, because again, you're having gratitude, you're putting all this stuff out in the universe, you're thinking on it, and then you're going to sleep, and that's staying right in there. Opposed to, scrolling on your phone until you go to sleep and you're just looking at this Instagram feed and you're seeing all these other things, TV just being on, whatever. Block all that out for a little bit, have some gratitude, think on it, go to sleep, and you'll start seeing a little bit of a difference there. Movement breaks. I encourage walks. Get 1-2 walks in a day, or even just if you're at work and you're just stuck at the desk, get up for a second, walk around a little bit, give yourself a little stretch. Do a little breathing exercise like Cassius had us do when we started this. And that just gives you little breaks, and movement allows for a kind of a reset to the nervous system. When I helped out in the elementary schools a few years ago, after every class, they would have the kids have 5-minute break to just get up and shake and wiggle and dance and everything, and then sit back down for the next subject, because it helped reset everything, get some energy out, refocus. So again, we can do that for ourselves. We're not kids. We may not want to get up and act silly, but you can do that. You can just stand up, shake it out a little bit, sit back down, get back to your work. So movement, walks, give yourself time to walk, just let your mind wander, be in touch with nature, have a conversation with somebody as you're walking. All of those things will definitely help, and it helps with your mental health and, it's exercise. So again, now digital boundaries. We were just kind of talking about the cell phone. Set a screens off time at night. Again, maybe a little bit before you go to bed. If you typically go to bed at 10 o'clock at night, maybe you decide at 9:30, I'm going to shut my phone off. And that allows for that space and time to clear your mind, maybe do your journaling, maybe you do your gratitude scan, you kind of sit with yourself, you're quiet, and you're not just, again, scrolling and everything all the way up till bedtime. Make space for quiet. This helps protect your focus and your mental energy. And in terms of digital boundaries, limit comparisons by unfollowing accounts that trigger insecurity. Nobody's forcing you to follow these pages and things like that you're on. If you're, maybe it's really innocent. It could be you're following a page that's about, travel. And that's supposed to inspire you. You like it, it's pretty things, it's all this kind of stuff. But then you start noticing, again, sitting with yourself and getting aware. I'm scrolling and looking at this, but then you start to think like, man, I'll never be able to get there. I haven't went on a vacation in 5 years. I don't have money for a vacation. How am I going to do that? And that's this page that you were following that was supposed to be fun and bring you enjoyment is now bringing you negativity, is making you have self-doubt, all that kind of stuff. So don't be afraid to unfollow that. There's nothing holding you to that. So just unfollow it if you notice that that's a trigger for you. And the 6th one is the connections check-in, and that's really easy. Just reach out to one person a week. Our stories improve with support. Just have somebody that you can talk to, reach out to, kind of put your life and what you're doing up to review, have somebody help you do that. It can be a friend, family member, a pastor, a mental health expert, whatever. Just reach out because again, our stories improve with support. And again, in terms of storytelling, an author or a director of a movie or a scriptwriter will do that too. They'll come up with their script or their book, and then they'll have somebody read it and review it and tell them, and then they adjust and they change it. We can do the same thing with the stories that we're telling ourselves. Well, progress, not perfection, is what we're looking for. It's not about doing everything, but it's about doing something consistently. Small habits equal big change over time. That's it. With the work that I do as a behavioral consultant with my clients, I may have a client that I work with now that has, 10 incidents of verbal aggression a month. And I would beat myself up like crazy if I expect that I'm going to get him to 0 behaviors in a month, but what I can do is if he's having 10 and he can get down to 8, that's a victory. That's a small victory. I praise him for that. I encourage that. We're happy about that because you were having 10 and now you only have 8. Now maybe we can get that down to 7, maybe we get down to 6, but it's always a work in progress and it's not perfection. So again, free yourself up from that. Just know this is something that you do every day, all day. You can just kind of do it. Pick one of those 6 things that we talked about or all of them and kind of do those things on a daily basis. Again, just to kind of recap, stories shape our mental health. You are the author and you can change the story. Every small habit is a new sentence in your story, and choose the story that you want to live. So again, kind of just a reflection for yourselves, what stories have you been telling yourselves lately? And what would it sound like if it were kind and true to yourself? Just think about that as we move on. Final thought. You can't always control what happens to you, but you can choose the story that you tell about it. And that story can change everything. That's it. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Jeff. We really appreciate that. He titled it, small shifts, big change, or big impact. And I think that's so pivotal in everything that he said. It's acknowledging that today is a small change. Today is a small shift in trajectory of your mental health, your own mental health, someone else's mental health, hearing these key pieces and then applying them, in these everyday little things. We think about the development of anything, it's a process. We think that there's the baby's in the womb for 10 months. We think about those trees that we passed in on the way over. They were little seeds. They were little seeds that grew to roots, that grew up in the ground, and then they grew to be as large as they are. But there was a process. It's these little steps and these little measures that we take, and they're going to have huge impact. The biggest piece, too, is always acknowledging mental health is the same as any other health authority. So we think about when we break a bone, they don't say, okay, you good now, your bone broke, and they send you on your way. No, they put you in a sling and you're in that cast for a little bit of time, and then it has to continue to heal. It's the same thing when it comes to our mental health. There's a process of the healing. And so it's not a real quick turnaround healing process, it's a process. And so thank you again, Jeff. And now we will take a time, and again, if you have questions for Jeff, he will be a part of the panel, and we'll have that at the end for that space. And so I want to introduce whom else is joining him on the panel. And so we have a licensed therapist, she cold, who has practiced for over a decade and focuses on the work in the community to assist with the destigmatizing of accessing mental health resources and mental health care. That is Miss Adrienne Wright. This next gentleman is part of the Get School Tour speaker. He's a co-host at Remedy Live. The Get School Tour is an interactive conviction provided by Remedy Live as an intervention tool and in the lives of students. And he also serves as a board member for Inspiration Ministries, a Northeast Indiana recovery housing ministry that assists in offering men and women an opportunity to join the path of recovery and encounter Christ for redemption and reconciliation through stable housing and restoring productivity in every area of life. Mr. Anthony Pons. A Christ-centered man, a father of a 7-year-old, he serves as a mentor with the Bloom Project, working with young men between the ages of 12 to 18. to help them develop well-rounded individuals for their future. Additionally, he's a public speaker driven to encourage his audience to acquire new skills while showing up in this world authentically as themselves. Mr. Terrence Frison. So yes, as we get into today's panel discussion, my very first question are, what are some of the biggest misconceptions about mental health that need to be flipped? Adrian, we'll start with you and then we'll work our way to the right and move back down.
Okay, so. There we go. Can everybody, I'll just try to project. So, as a therapist, I see a lot of people come in and they have a lot of narratives about themselves. Oh, you're good. We're with it, we're with it. So they have a lot of like preconceived notions, even with coming into my office that first time. Some of the most common perceptions that I hear, I'm weak because I'm here. I should is a bad word. I always tell my people, hey, let's just start with getting rid of should, because anytime you have should, your brain is already saying we're not there, we're failing. So I should be able to deal with this myself. I should be here. I should be here. So I feel like just in general, from society or just some of those inner self talks that we have, mental health is always seen as like this bad thing. It's not often seen as, hey, I go to the doctor for my physical and that's just fine. No one ever says I'm weak because I'm going to say, hey, my arm is feeling a little weird today. So I feel like that's one of the biggest misconceptions about mental health, is that it's somehow a barrier if you're addressing it.
Yeah, along with mental health being, I'm weak if I speak about it. Another misconception is that if I say it, I'll create a problem that might not really be there. Some people think if I start talking about mental health, or if I talk to youth about it, or if I bring it up, I'm gonna make somebody believe something that's not true. I believe sometimes we're the biggest second guessers of ourselves that prevent us from getting help. Because we're in the middle of a struggle, we'll talk ourselves out of it real quick, and that's a huge misconception. If we would just own it quickly and actually speak about it directly, we're not creating a problem that's not there. We're just being honest and true and real. And so a misconception is that I'm going to create a problem that is false, and that's not correct.
Yes. So when it comes to, hearing that there's, this misconception around and it's okay to address, how do we help individuals, that work in schools, that work in workplaces, and even families create a space for, individuals to want to seek counseling or wanting to seek, more information around mental health?
I think that it deals with education, especially when you're talking about changing the misconceptions of it. If you can start early in schools and things like that and have like really fun, interesting programs that kids can get around, teachers can get around, then at least it breaks kind of down that barrier a little bit. And just understanding that, like when we say mental health, I think a lot of people automatically just think negative or bad things, because we think mental health, you're thinking anxiety, bad stuff, depression. But mental health can be positive too. It's like if you can be in a good place, you still have mental health. It's just good. So when we're talking about mental health, it's not always bad. And we're always trying to improve our lives in every other area. Why not always try to improve your mental health too? So I think it's just a real easy way to kind of talk to people about it. Like we're working all these things anyway. Why not be very direct about it and work on yourself? But it definitely starts with those type of classes and programs. And we're going to have to do it on our own because, times that we're living in now, a lot of that stuff is getting stripped away. So it's on us as a community to be able to put on these programs and speak to our kids and each other in a positive way that uplifts everybody.
So one of the things that I do in my home with my son on my job is I would tell them whenever I'm not my best. Like my son, he's 7. And if I'm not feeling it that day, I'll tell him, like, can you give me 5 minutes? Or it was the day when we were coming home from a Colts game and my tire popped. I had a lot of issues going on that day. I had to get home, but the tire popped 20 minutes away. And he's asking me all these questions. And they were good questions, but I just wasn't in a place to answer them. So I said, hey, can you give me 5 minutes while I just get myself together real quick? And he respected it. So on the reverse end of that, I get a return on my investment when he's able to come to me and tell me like, hey, dad, I'm just not feeling it right now. And what a blessing that is.
I just think that there's power in everybody's story. So if we're keeping our stories to ourselves because we're worried about how other people are gonna perceive us, I think that that also kind of perpetuates that discussing mental health should be a secret. So just being open and honest. I know like in my family, and even in my church, I talk a lot about therapy. I talk about me going to therapy. You know, I'm like, you know, when people are saying, hey, do you know a good therapist? You know, I won't be like, yeah, I know this person. I'm like, yeah, no, I know this person. So I'll like say it with my chest. I'll be open and I'll be confident about it because it is important to share your story. And then if you share your story, people, you know, see it as less of a shame-based thing because we're all in this. We all are going through life and life can be hard.
I love something he said, about the mental health is mental health. We don't have to always be focused on the negative. We can focus on the positive. And so if we started celebrating the positive, like when we think about mental health, we say, I'm working on myself as if there's something like dysfunctional. But what if we're grateful today? What if we celebrate, man, I was grateful today? Or you notice that within somebody around you and you celebrate the positive mental health. Say, man, I love the way you engage that person. That's healthy mental health. If we would reinforce the positive, it wouldn't be looked at as a negative all the time. Like I'm always continuously working on something.
That's huge. So you guys already kind of shared a little bit with us, but could you expand on just a little bit more? What are the strategies that people can use to just rewrite their own mental health stories and reclaim that power?
I think something that I've learned to do is it's called the implementation intention. It's a fancy way of saying whenever I feel something is when I do something. So whenever we get hungry, we tend to eat, right? Whenever we get thirsty, we tend to drink. So whenever there's a problem in my body or a dysfunction that's going on in my mental health, what am I going to do about it? So he gave ways, I think it was 6 ways of how to do that earlier. So a nice way of saying that is like when I start to feel anxious about something, I'll go journal. But it's not waiting until I'm anxious to start that. It is when I feel it, I do it. So that's something that I practice a lot.
I do an exercise myself, and I also encourage a lot of my clients, when you're having thoughts or feelings, and maybe you're having a hard time allowing yourself to have compassion. One exercise you can do is like write with your non-dominant hand exactly what you do, what you're thinking, what you're feeling. And the interesting thing is if you write with your non-dominant hand and you look at it, it almost looks like there's a child that wrote it. And so sometimes I talk to people about, you know, hey, if you can't give yourself that grace, try to give that child, because we all have our inner children within us still, who are still responding and reacting to things. So, you know, sometimes I might write something that I'm feeling with my non-dominant hand and I'm like, this is a baby that's writing this. Why am I yelling at a baby? Why am I saying get it together to this baby? So that's a strategy that sometimes works for me. I like.
Yeah, and and have direction with yourself. Like I feel like a lot of us just go through life and we're just kind of willy-nilly, and we wake up late, we get going, and the world has already grabbed us, and we're just at the whim of what's happening already. So have some direction. If you wanted to take a trip from here to California, you wouldn't just go. You would look up the directions, or at least put it in your GPS, so the GPS tells you how to get there. You would have direction on how to get there. So get some direction, and that can be through if you're a religious person, a spiritual person, lean on your beliefs and let that be your guiding compass. If you don't have that, then philosophy or come up with your own value system or whatever that is, and then make sure that you're living your life and you're responding in moments through your lens of what values that you have. And I think if you do that, you're giving yourself already a head start in a good direction to be able to reframe and change everything that you're thinking about.
It's amazing. What would you guys say was a defining moment that changed how you viewed mental health?
For me, it was when I started going to therapy. I was going to therapy. I wanted to go to therapy because there were some things in my past that had happened. And I thought that I wasn't thinking the right way. When I would talk to people, I thought my thinking was off, my process is off, where the processing is wrong. And when I started to go to therapy, Angel, I started to realize that it wasn't that I was off, I just needed some help. And when my therapist told me, she said that, you are doing people a disservice by not sharing what you have to this world. And it started to shift something for me because it allowed me to realize that I can be broken, but still anointed. I can be broken, but still have a calling, still have a gift. And when I started to realize that that was possible for me, I started to want to see other people around me do the same thing. So I started having those conversations with my mom, started having those conversations with my siblings. And yeah, that's what changed.
I would say a defining moment for me that kind of shifted how I looked at mental health. So when I got into like the mental health game, I was 21. And then like I was a psychology professor, and I felt like all of the things that I was doing were kind of like surface level. And, I'm meeting with other people, but then I got to this point where I hit this wall and I became like a shell of myself. And I had to go back and I had to go to therapy and I had to realize like, hey, it's good. We say all these words like, yeah, keep yourself going. And I also learned about toxic positivity, which I also am very aware of. But again, that kind of just helped me shift to be like, hey, let's just be real with yourself, right? And I feel like in allowing myself to be real and upfront with myself, it's allowed me to even be more real and upfront with other people. And I feel like I'm a much better therapist than I was back then, just because I am coming through it with like an authentic lens of myself and not neglecting myself. So I feel like that was a shift. My body had to be like, whoa, you just got to stop everything for me to sit back and reflect. So I feel like that was a defining moment for my life.
Well, a defining moment for me came from a specific experience that I experienced in my life. But before I get to that, what led up to that experience was that I started to realize that my definitions for life, my thoughts for life, the way I viewed life, the way I perceived everything, what was real, actually got me nowhere. It didn't get me to where I expected to be. It didn't give me the success that I thought it was going to give me. As a matter of fact, everything and every way that I viewed life ultimately ended me up in a place, in a spot that I never could have imagined. And for me personally, it was when I landed in jail, facing capital murder and about to spend the rest of my life in prison. As a 19-year-old kid, on my college break, at going to an HBCU at Florida A&M, I expected that the way I thought about life would ultimately end me up in success. And when I ended up in that spot, I realized that something's off. Something's broke about the way I'm viewing life and the way my mentality and thoughts are towards life, as to why I could have ended up in this spot, even though I thought I was going in the right direction. And so from that event, that's when I started to realize, and I mean, for me personally, that's where my testimony comes in. But through that and through the next 12 years, 9 months that I spent incarcerated, I was able to actually see that there were, I wasn't actually, the way my brain wasn't healthy. My past, my upbringing, my history wasn't well. And so that started to get me to think about like, okay, what does real health look like? And that's what shifted my whole thought on this concept of mental health and making sure that my brain's processing life correctly.
For me, it's probably when I started going in this direction in terms of a career. Again, I was working at that factory when it closed, and I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, and they were actually offering that they would pay for 2 years of college if you wanted to go in that direction as a part of the package from when we got let go. And I was trying to decide if I wanted to do that or not, because I had already tried college twice and it didn't work out. And I ended up reaching out to a family member, like I had talked about it on the slides, and just kind of talking about it. He said, well, you're good with people. People like you. Why don't you try something with people? So I started going down human services road in terms of education and school. And that led me into my first internship, Boys and Girls Club. And into this career of working with families and working with youth and working with individuals with disabilities, and that just all just flooded me with issues and positives of mental health, and it just kind of got me going in that trajectory, because when you're working with people, you're working with mental health, because we all are dealing with it in some way. So I knew that that was an important aspect of what I would be doing, and kind of just got serious with it and shifted my mind into that.
I feel like this is a grand moment to respect the pause. I mean, I don't know about you all, but just hearing what was just shared, I honestly just want to applaud them. For them to all be here on this panel and to acknowledge, trials and tribulations that they have gone through in their journey and say, hey, no, we still journeying, but we here now to kind of give more tools. It's just amazing. And so with that, how do you guys personally challenge stigma in your everyday life and work?
Well, for me, I think being a behavioral consultant, it makes it kind of easy for me, because I go out in the community and in public all the time with my clients, and depending on the severity of their mental health, you don't know. So when you're out there, the general public can kind of look at that, and there's stigmas that are associated with that. But I normalize it by walking with them, guiding them, and we're just going through our days, and we're making the best possible life that they can have. And then also breaking the stigma for the people that then get to be around us and in our presence. And usually a lot of times if they're around those individuals, they start seeing like, maybe it's not everything that I thought it was, or maybe these individuals aren't what I thought. So for me, just going out in the day with my clients, interacting with them, interacting with people is a way that I can help break that stigma every day while I'm just out and about.
I'm a deep thinker. So a lot of what I do on a daily basis is I reflect over situations, over things that I go through. And more times than not, Uncle Ted, I found myself validating those moments of my life when I was younger and things would happen. I have to validate that person, validate those things that I've been through, and realize how that person is still showing up in the person that I am today. And I give myself grace, but I also don't just look at myself when I'm telling my story or when I'm going at life. I realize that she could be struggling with something that went on in her life, and I also have to give her grace in the moments when she's less than her best. But whenever the person beside me is less than their best, and I'll open the space for people to talk about it. I think that's a lot of what we're missing in these days is the space for people to just talk about it. A lot of times what we see is people healing broken. If a person was to break their finger and they were to never go to the doctor, it would heal, but it would heal broken. And a lot of times we don't open up those spaces, and we don't know that there's another way to heal, because more so than not, we've been taught we can do it in our home, or I can do this myself. Well, every strong man that I know that ever went to the gym, at some point they have to go home. You can't stay being strong forever, is what I'm trying to say. And yeah.
Yeah, I think it's cool through Remedy Live. We get an opportunity to travel into middle school and high schools all across the Midwest. And one of the cool things that we are allowed to do is we allow the students to interact through a platform where we pass out questions to them in real time as we're sharing. And they can answer openly and honestly. And what ends up happening is we get a chance to show some of those results on a screen, and kids get to see that they're not alone. Because when we struggle, whether it be anxiety, depression, one of the lies that's whispered in our ears is that nobody gets it. I'm all alone. I'm the only one dealing with this. And that's where stigma's built, when you think that you're it. So then there's this stigma attached to opening up. But when you can see that you're not alone, when you can see that there's other people that are struggling the same thing, that stigma's reduced and you're more apt to share openly. And so for me, when I go into those settings, I try to be vulnerable and real with my own struggle. Let me tell you what's up. Let me tell you what I've been through. Let me tell you what, and then that just breaks down the walls of stigma, where a person can say, oh, well, guess what? I've been through this too. So every struggle I've ever been through, the minute I open up to somebody else about it, I always encounter something about that individual, I wouldn't have never known. I wouldn't have never known they were once divorced and then had a kid before, and it just stuff comes out. And it just reduces the stigma so much by being vulnerable.
And I think just having tough conversations, there are a lot of things that we just don't talk about. And when we don't talk about them, that doesn't make them go away. It just kind of gives them more power to kind of linger in the background of our lives. So like, I think that even in my practice, you know, asking difficult questions, like even asking, are you thinking about killing yourself? That is a question that a lot of people stray away from because they're worried about, oh, what if they say yes? Or what if I say yes, what is gonna happen? But we need to have those conversations. This fall, I was really fortunate to be a part of an initiative with high school students who were within the Black culture because something real, Black youth are killing themselves at higher rates compared to the national average in Indiana, so much so that there have been grants specifically to study why this is a phenomenon. So we got a whole bunch of high school students from all over Fort Wayne, and you know, most of them, you know, had never even really talked about suicide before, but we talked about it. We talked about their supports. We talked about who they feel comfortable with talking to. We talked about who they don't feel comfortable with and why. And there was no judgment. We just had the conversations. And thankfully, because of that, they have taken this initiative and they've continued to go, and they've even gone to Indianapolis and they've been talking to, you know, politicians so that people can hear their voices. And it all started from having those difficult conversations. So domestic violence, we are talking a lot about that. Substance abuse, having those difficult conversations, even when you're like, what are people gonna say? You gotta have them, because they're there. They're gonna be there whether you're talking about them or not, so you might as well just talk about them. So that's
With that, Adrian, you said something kind of key there. I want us to look and reflect now. In what ways do cultural, societal, and even generational beliefs impact how we view mental health?
well, I mean, just kind of even with that initiative that we were talking about, something that came up was, you know, there are a lot of ideologies that we pass on from generation to generation, such as, you know, hey, what happens in this house stays in this house. How many people have heard that? See, yeah. So we when things are happening to us and we don't feel comfortable, you know, we're more likely to keep those on the inside. And we can keep them on the inside, but you know, we're kind of like suffering in silence. And then we have other people that we give birth to or that we have, and then, you know, we're telling them the same thing and now they're suffering in silence. And then that cycle just kind of continues until one person says, you know what, I'm not going to keep this in anymore. I'm going to get it out there. And that's where a lot of, you know, there's like a buzz in social media talking about like healing generational trauma. That's where it started. It starts by taking the stuff that's on the inside that we've been having to push down for years and starting to slowly get it out of there. And when you get out of there, other people are like, yeah, that happened to me too. And then we can have a discussion, okay, well, what do we do with this? Because I'm not alone. I'm not the only person. So, yeah, I feel like that a lot of those rules that we've been taught kind of help with those cultural shifts to kind of continue to keep us suffering in silence.
I have one more question for you guys before we turn it over to you all with any questions you guys may have. I want to say what is missing in the current mental health conversation? Like, what do we need to help fill the gap?
I love this question because I feel like this question is super hard. And the reason I believe that is because I think it's twofold. One is of course we could think about our current situation and generation and individuals, and I want to speak to that here in a second. But of course, the long haul, the long game is how do we move more into the intervention spaces? We have so many things when it comes to treatment. We have treatment physically. We have mental health treatment when there's crisis. We have substance use treatment when someone. But do we have broken home treatment? Like, do we have treatment that flows upstream to youth and what they're dealing with that they might not know they're struggling with for intervention purposes. Secondly, like that takes long term, like you're trying to change a generation or a culture. But one thing I hear a lot, and it breaks my heart, like when I go to a school and I'm talking to administration, and they're talking about including families and stuff that they do because they're trying to help change that culture. A lot of times they'll get the families that come out that are basically preaching to the choir. The ones that don't really need the help, like they're the family that come out. It's the ones that the doors locked, doors are shut. Mom, that dad ain't coming out. How do we get into the community and into the houses of those parents? To get people who are shut away, locked away, my parents. And that's what I think about, like, if we want to really talk about changing the culture, we gotta have boots on the ground, almost like an army. Like if we had an army of people just, hey, time to, come out the cobwebs or whatever, I think that would be huge. That would be huge.
I think it's when we're fighting this battle that you call mental health, there is a lot of people who don't know what they're searching for. So we say mental health, but what is the end goal? And it's kind of that question of I wanted to go to therapy, but what's the end result? And we have to have an answer. And if I was to give my take on the answer, I think it would just be balance. A lot of us go into therapy searching for, it's called a mental health cure, which is the void of the issue. Which if I go to therapy, I'll never think about depression again. I'll never be depressed again. What we really need is mental healing, which is the acceptance of the change. At every state, there's gonna be change. And it's just, how do I accept the change, right? And if we were to get a little bit more personal, I remember you said something about suicide. I tried to commit suicide when I was a sophomore in high school. Mr. Uncle Ted, and when I did that, I was thinking about the fact that I was lonely. My mom and my sister were in the next room. So I'm like, yeah, I'm in a house of people. Yeah, I feel lonely. So when I told them what I did, they rushed me to the hospital. I got to the hospital. I went to PBH, and the guy there, he shifted something for me. And I'll always remember his words. He said, your family would have been.
He said, your family what now?
He said, your family would have been getting ready for your funeral in 7 days. And I had to realize, like, this all came because I felt lonely. I had no balance in my thoughts. I had no balance in my emotions, nor in my behaviors. So when we think about mental health, we think about balance. But where does balance start? It starts with how we show up in the world. What do I think about myself? And then it also shows up in our emotions. And how do I manage the emotions that I'm having, Mr. White? And then it also shows up in the things that I think about myself. So it's your emotions, your thoughts, and then your behaviors.
And there's so many ways that you can kind of go with it, but something that's sticking out to me, especially in listening to what you guys are saying and about the suicide and things like that, and what we had touched on earlier about the youth. I think something that's missing is just providing a space for them to just talk and just be seen. A lot of the kids, we do programs, we put on programs, they're involved in things, and we talk at them and we talk to them and we try to teach them, but nobody is providing them just a space to just be them and just talk and be seen. They're going through school, they're at home, the family members are in the other room, and they're still not feeling like they're seen. So providing a space for them just to be themselves and be seen and talk is something that's missing, as opposed to like talking at them. And yeah, I think that's really the thing that's sticking out to me the most at the moment.
Yeah, I agree. Just kind of having those spots to where you can ask those hard questions and listen to people in a non-judgmental stance. So my sister back there, she kind of started something called like table talks that we try to do once a month. We have food and anyone's invited, all ages. So, you could be a baby to 99. We've had 90-year-olds, we've had babies, and we literally just talk. And it's just, we just talk. There's a topic, we'll bring it up and we'll just talk about it. This 35, this 55-year-old man says his perspective, this 12-year-old girl says her perspective. And no one is going back and forth, no one is arguing, we're just listening and talking, and that's it. So I feel like having those spaces to where you can have tough discussions and allow people to have those tools to where they're not talking at or bringing you down or judging you or like, why would you think that? Just being able to have that, I think that those spaces are really much so needed. So just more community engagement.
Right. I think if I can, I think in closing, it's, I think a large component to it is trusting the fact that you trusted God. And a lot of times we get lost because we find ourselves in situations, Mr. H, where we didn't ask for it. We could have never imagined it, but I trusted God to get me in it. And most importantly, we have to trust God to get us out of it. So.
Thank you, guys. I want to hear from you guys. I know you guys, or some of you like, man, I heard him say this. I want to follow up with this. And so if you can, just go ahead and raise your hand and I'll come around with one of these mics and we can get you, your question asked.
Yeah, that one works.
So my question, I really kind of condensed it into one question from like 5. But what role can family and friends play in kind of changing the brain perspective, the outlook from a scarcity mindset, as we talk about some of those like suicidal depression spaces where people live in or are experiencing? Like, how do we change that scarcity mindset to an abundancy mindset? So what role can family and friends and even outsiders play in helping people kind of come from like a struggle to like, even if it's 1% better the next day? Everybody in this room is not necessarily a mental health counselor. I'm far from it. I am not a very good mental health person. So like, what role can someone like me who has no clue, no training, what can I do to help someone I see and I identify is in a scarcity place and help them go into an abundance place?
So there are 4 things you can do, right? This is, I call them, they're called GIVE skills, and it's an acronym. So G is you can be gentle with people, right? You can speak to them with gentle words. You can speak to them with a gentle tone. You can act interested. I always joke, like sometimes my 7-year-old, he'll come and talk to me about a YouTube video. And I'm not really 100% interested in the YouTube video, but I will be acting. I'm like, and then what did Techie say? And then what did they do? So act interested, because when you act interested, it makes people feel like they're being heard and they're being seen. You want to be validating, even if you don't see how they got to that. There's a reason why they got to that. Just like Jeff was talking about, we see things based off of our experiences. So validating, hey, this is how they got to that. I wouldn't have gotten to that, but this is how they got to it. So if this is how they got to it, that's where you are. And then the last thing is just be easy with it, right? We like to be talking at people. We like to be, and now you got to just be easy, make a little jokey joke, have fun, So I think like just doing those 4 things, no matter who you talk to, that automatically shifts that, scarcity mindset to abundancy, because you're allowing them a safe place. And we can have abundance and safety. If we're in survival mode, we don't have a lot of abundance. We're just down to the bare minimum basic necessities. So that's what I'm.
And then with like in the talk, the 6th step was to reach out to connecting to an individual every week. So that's what I would say is like, you can just be that individual to that person that they reach out to and they just need to talk to. And that's just called being an active listener. You don't have to do too much. you can be gentle and do all the things that she said and just be there and listen and be the person that that individual is coming to talk and try to reframe their mindset. And just being there for them is really, I mean, that's the simplest thing you can do. And sometimes some of the best things that you can do.
I feel like she came from a very nurturing, motherly perspective there, and that was awesome. And as guys, we need to really embrace a lot of that in the way we do. But on the dad side, a lot of times when people are in scarcity mindsets, they start to run to things that actually harm and make it worse. And so one thing, I think about this in substance use a lot. One thing that families can stop doing is they could stop enabling. We can stop enabling our youth and our brothers and sisters and into harmful things when in the name of helping. We can stop doing that. I think that will move a person from a scarcity mindset and that scarcity taking them to dangerous things to an abundant mindset. That if I think about this with my grandparents, they are so resilient because they had to fight fights I don't have to fight. If we put our next generation in situations and spots that build resilience instead of being enabling, along with the nurturing side of validating, that perfect balance we would move a lot of people into abundant lives.
I think I've got three things. So with people who are in that mindset, wins for them are scarce. So in those moments, Cash, we have to let people enjoy themselves. And at that time is not the time to be the critic. It's just to let the person enjoy who they are in that moment. Because we know feelings are fleeting. And then two, I know that don't remind them. Don't remind them of who they were. Just live in the moment with them. And then three, I would say follow up. Too many times we get vulnerable with people and we open up a door for emotion to fall through, and then there's no follow-up. So if a person gets vulnerable with you, follow up. Whenever I follow up with people, I will set it on my calendar to follow up with that person about what we talked about. So I think you just have to be intentional in following up with the person about whatever it is that they think they should share with you.
Thank you. I appreciate all the information you guys gave me. I love a lot of your responses, Terrence. One thing I kind of noticed, and I might have came in late, some of you found out that you was having mental health issues later in life. Do you think you projected signs that was overlooked earlier?
Absolutely. If I can. So when I was about, I think I was like 6 or 7 years old, my mom, she had a boyfriend, and this guy, he was trying to get in the house. And my first memory, this is my first ever memory of life, period. And when the guy was trying to get in the house, we were throwing the couch in front of the door. We were throwing the tables, trying not to let this guy in, but he still got in. And what happened after that is kind of blurry, but I remember the response of, I will never let somebody put their hands on my mama again. So in life, I showed up trying to be everybody's protector, yet unprotected. So now when I'm in life now and I see myself trying to show up as a protector, it tells me that I don't have to be that for everybody. So I think that's one of the ways to show up.
I think just in general, like just kind of piggybacking off of that, just being like mindful, like sometimes we put a lot of burdens on kids that have like responsibility over things that aren't their responsibility. And kids look a different way when that happens. So, like for instance, like growing up, like I had some spaces in my life where there was a lot of chaos. And so because there was a lot of chaos in some of those spaces, like I developed like this very kind of like cool, laid back nature because I was always going with the flow. And, you know, like maybe like to some people, like that was seen as like being the good kid or, you know, like not really having, but on the inside, I'm suffering on the inside because like I'm making sure that everybody else is okay. I'm putting out fires before they even start. I'm noticing when someone is like getting escalated, I'm like, hey, let's kind of go in. So like I feel like even some of those things, just like being mindful, like, hey, has this child reacting to themselves or is this child reacting to me? And I think like even what you were saying, like how we show emotion regulation, especially around our children, is really important because children need to see us regulating our emotions. They need to see us have the emotions, all of the emotions, and they need to see us be able to handle them without their intervention. And so I think like sometimes when you see that kid who like when mom's crying and they come right over and they're trying to take care of mom, like you know that could be like a flag to like be looking out for because hey, they're being responsible over something that they're not responsible for. So I think just kind of being mindful of those little roles that these kids are kind of putting on, or even as adults are kind of putting on, you know, like I'm really big now. I'm like, hey, that's not my thing, you know, so good luck with that. I'm wishing you the best from over here, but that's not my responsibility.
Yeah, same here. I grew up in foster care, so I didn't recognize this till I was much older in life. That I actually had 1,000 friends, all of them an inch deep, because I would never let anybody in, because I thought anything good in my life would ultimately leave. So it should have been a warning sign growing up that because I wouldn't allow people in, something was off going on with me. And then in middle school and high school, uh, when I started to just seek outlets through everything, any kind of means, pleasure, that should have been a huge warning sign. When I'm looking through inappropriate relationships or just using any and everything, that should have been a warning sign that I'm not processing life correctly. And so that's what I see in a lot of youth. They're experiencing, you know, unhealthy outlets.
Yeah, and there's definitely, I mean, there's always signs if you're attentive to it. And again, I worked in foster care, so I kind of saw a lot of the kids had that similar disposition. And even some kids, like again, foster parents would think like, I'm getting this child in and they're going to be wild and all these things are going to happen. And then sometimes they would get kids that would just sit in their room and not say anything. And they're like, man, this is great. This kid is great. But really, that was the sign. That kid was going through a lot of mental health and a lot of things. And the way he was doing it was by closing in and not saying anything. So that was a sign. I worked in the school system and I remember a little girl was just being very aggressive, starting to fight. And the teacher was just like, she's this, and not really kind of giving any care. We took the child to the side and kind of talking to her, and then come to find out the night before, she saw her mother get beat by her boyfriend and she didn't eat that night. So then now she's in school and they're telling her to sit down and do math. Well, she can't sit down and do math. She's up, she's doing all kinds of stuff because she's hungry and she just saw her mom get beat up the night before. And imagine the mental, strain that puts on a child. And her way of doing it was lashing out in class, not sitting down at her desk. All of those were signs. So there's definitely signs everywhere if you're open for it, and they are telling you without telling you.
This young lady here, that you mentioned the table talk,
Yes.
I would like to know when, where, and what time.
Yeah. So, so like I said, it's usually once a month. My sister in the back, she's the one that has that. So after this, you can meet with her and she will give you the date. She does the dates and we do the topics. So, because she goes with her work schedule.
Sister,
So
you wanna raise your hand?
yes, that is.
There she go.
Yeah. And she's not 14, she's 27. She's an adult.
Cause you know like a child.
Well, I gotta raise my hand 100 miles an hour, man, dang. But the question I had was, what does it look like to be healed? Cause if you ask my mom, she's healed. But my opinion is, no, like you do this and this and this and this, but wholeheartedly, like somebody could really believe that they're healed, but they're not. So would you claim being healed is an opinion? Would you claim being healed is something that you feel wholeheartedly, just feel like, I can say I'm healed, but you know, that second source can tell me, no, you're not. So what is that vision? Like, what does it look like to be healed?
So healing is like a journey. And I always kind of like equate it, like if you play video games, like the old school video games, not now, like the first person shooter.
Like Pac-Man?
Yeah, like so every time, like in video games, the levels get a little bit harder. And really you're just kind of like honing your skills to kind of pass that level with a little bit more ease. So like level 1, you probably didn't have the same skills that you had at level 25, right? So healing is just basically kind of continuing to kind of learn how, because life is always going to be ever changing. So to have someone say like with definity, I am healed, like, okay, so then that means that life is done. Then that's not the case. So it's all, so for me, like, well, and that's why what we talk about, like with goals, like in therapy, if you go to individual therapy, one thing we do is we talk about goals, and all of those goals are measurable. So, you know, if you're having 10, you know, you're cussing out people 10 times a week, we can get you down to 8. That's some progress, right? So the healing is in the progress, right? There is no definite I'm healed, because life is going to hit you with some new stuff, and you're going to have to use some of your old coping skills. You're going to have to learn some new tactics in order to keep going. So as far as like what is healing is learning. Healing is taking acknowledgement, like, hey, you know, that level almost took me out. Maybe I need to jump sooner this time.
So when we speaking of mental health, so when we speaking of mental health, the correct word is healing, healed.
Right. It's almost like with recovery, like, you know, like when people say like, I'm an ex-addict, it's like, you're really not. Like, you're always in recovery. Like, you're in recovery every single day until you're not. So yeah, it's a process. It's a journey. You can be more healed than you were last time. You know, you can, you know, as far as this situation in my life, I'm handling it a lot better than I would have 2 years ago. That's a journey. But like to say like, hey, I'm healed, almost kind of gives the illusion of a perfect, right? When we think of, you know, healed, sometimes people are like, oh, I don't have a care in the world. And no one is perfect, right? So that's just like my 2 cents though. Like other people have other opinions, but
So I think there's 3 aspects of it. If you think about a wound that opens up on your body, you have what you see, you have what happens in the process, and then you have what you feel. And I think healing is about how is all 3 of those parts coming together. How am I feeling? What are my behaviors like? And then what is my internal process looking like? You know what I mean? So I think healing is, like she said, it's a process. It's something that's never, it's a nebulous term. It's always moving. You'll always be able to heal more, right? Yeah.
Thank you for tuning in to Flipping the Script, Changing the Mental Health Narrative. While the recording ended early, the event continued with more Q&A and valuable dialogue. We appreciate your interest and encourage you to stay connected with Health Visions Midwest for future events, resources, and community updates.